Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode. Today I'm joined by Mr. Tom DuPree III. He is a musician, producer, and music marketer, and he spent years as a touring drummer and a studio drummer, and he now owns and operates a music marketing company called DuPree X. So today I'm here with Tom, who I discovered through his YouTube channel, which is great. You should check that out as well. And just to kick things off, Tom, I'm curious about your origin story as a musician. How did your career get started? I know that there's probably many listeners who are fascinated to hear about your experiences touring and as a studio drummer. So, yeah, how can you kick things off with your kind of like coming up in the music industry?
Sure. Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I appreciate it. Yeah, so I wanted to start playing drums when I was 7, but my parents made me take piano lessons for 2 years, which seems kind of irrelevant and a far way back to start the story, but it is important because getting that foundation helps solidify my understanding of music. And then when I moved on to drums at 9, I had a good foundation that I could sort of communicate with other, players of other instruments. So I was always kind of maybe not the de facto leader, but I was always somewhat of in a leadership position in every band I was in. I was the guy who kept the checkbook. I was the guy making calls to booking agents. I just always had sort of a business acumen. I inherited that from my dad. He was an entrepreneur, so he encouraged me to approach it like a business. Not to suck the fun out of it, but to, if you want to do this, basically give it your best shot. And here's kind of a few tools that can help you. So I played all through high school and all through college and a lot of bar gigs, a lot of late nights. Everybody else is hanging out having fun, and I'm packing drums at 3, 4 in the morning back into my car to drive home. And then I got out of college, or was about to graduate from college at 22, and just thought to myself, if I'm going to give this a shot, it's got to be now. And if I don't, I don't, I'll wake up 20 years from now and I'll regret it. And I didn't want that. So I knew that at some point I probably would not want to tour anymore. I didn't know when that would be. But I thought if I'm going to give it the old college try, 22 years old is the time to do it. So I graduated from school. I moved to California, to Los Angeles for a year and a half. Played with a couple bands out there. Nothing really took off. Then I moved to Nashville because I'm from Georgia originally. I grew up in the South and I've always loved it. And I kind of missed home, so I came to Nashville. I was not a big country music guy, but I joined a band pretty quickly after getting to Nashville. I had a YouTube channel at the time. I had one video. It was me playing a drum solo. And if this gives you any idea of the times, I took a link to that YouTube video and posted it on Craigslist. And a band found me, invited me to come audition. I got the gig. Fast forward 10 months later, we had a record deal with Universal Republic. And it just was a wild ride as soon as I got here in Nashville. We cut a big 6-figure record. We had Chris Lord-Alge, who's one of the biggest mix engineers of all time in rock and roll. He mixed 2 of the songs on it, and then the record label put it on the shelf and never put it out. So pretty rough. um, but we kept trying to make that band work, and um, we cut another record, but it just didn't take off, and so we all kind of got frustrated. So I threw my hat in the ring, was as sort of the hired gun here in Nashville because there's plenty of work if you're a good player. So I thought that I could cut it, and fortunately ended up being correct. I got a good gig with a girl named Jana Kramer. She was an actress before being a country singer, still is an actress, but she was on a show called One Tree Hill and I think Friday Night Lights and some other stuff. So I kind of knew loosely who she was. A friend of mine got the gig first, and then the drummer ended up needing to be replaced. So I got the call, auditioned, got the gig. And that has happened kind of consistently throughout my career where I will get my name sort of put in the ring by somebody I know. And it's not somebody who's ahead of me. It's somebody that I've known for years and years and years. And it just happens to pan out that way. So it happened again many years later. The last touring gig I had was with a band called Tonic. And they were really big in the 90s. They had a song called If You Could Only See, which was just a huge multi-platinum smash, song, and Grammy nominated, crazy stuff for that band. And so that was really cool. Um, and I finished up on a good note with them and ended up kind of calling it on the touring career because I got married and had kids and started a business, and the business started to take off. And I thought, well, I can't do both. So now it's time to make a change.
Oh, that's so cool. It sounds like a great experience that you had coming like after taking a chance at a young age. I know that there's lots of people who do that and it doesn't exactly pan out. So it's great that it worked out for you. And tell me about the transition now. So you mentioned having a family, getting married, having kids. How did that impact the way that you approach your career and your life? And what exactly, like in more detail, sparked the want to change the trajectory of your career?
Yeah. So I got married and I continued to tour. My wife has always been very supportive. And of course she thought it was cool if she gets to come backstage at stuff and so we had a lot of fun during that season. And then we had our first son. His name is Tom as well. He's Tom the fourth. You got to do it.
Yep. Well,
uh,
once you're at three, I mean, what's
yeah,
stopping you? You got to keep
yeah,
going.
yeah. So we had Tom, and I still wanted to keep going, and I wanted to balance it. And fortunately, at the time, I was able to do that. I was playing for Tonic, and they were only doing like 40 shows, 50 shows a year. It was not a ton of work. I was used to doing like 150, 200 shows sometimes, or at least days being gone. And it wasn't like that. So it was like, oh, I can balance this. And I was doing session work from home and here in Nashville. And just started on YouTube, just kind of poking around, actually trying to take it seriously and post regularly. And it all was kind of working pretty well. There were some stressors, of course. I hated being away from my wife, even when we didn't have kids. And then once we had Tom, I really did not like being away from home, but it was okay when it was just weekends. We would go and play 2 or 3 shows in a row, and then we'd come home. And so it was like, well, I'm just gone for Friday, Saturday night. That's okay. And then a couple of week-long runs, and I was like, okay, this may not be doable for the long term. And then we had our second son, Theo, and that's when it sort of dawned on me, like, I can't keep doing this for a number of reasons. Number one, it's not fair to my wife. She's a single mom when I'm gone. And number two, I just miss my children like crazy, and they need me to be their dad more than Tonic needs me to be their drummer, right? And Tonic is by far the best gig I've ever had. I love that band. I love all those dudes. I loved playing those songs. It was an absolutely incredible experience. I do miss it, absolutely. But again, my children need me more than Tonic needs me. So that was really the impetus for change is uh, a couple of phone calls when I was gone for like more than 2 or 3 days at a time. And I could just sort of, my wife would never outwardly say it, but I could tell that she was sort of stressed and tired. And I started to feel selfish. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I've got to figure this out. So I started to push down really hard on building a business of my own. And I would say I jumped ship prematurely from touring into my own business. It did not have its legs under it at all. But I thought, you know what? I've always taken risks and I've landed, head up. So we'll just give it a shot again and see what happens. And fortunately, it has worked out.
Well, they do say to start before you're ready in anything that you do because you can plan forever and ever, and things will never be perfect. So might as well just jump in head first. And I completely relate to what you just said about having kids and wanting to be home and the need to be a father first, before anything else. I have two kids also, and I've never been put in a position where I had to leave home for an extended period of time. Although I did once turn down a job offer that would have required me to leave for quite a while. So yeah, I'm right there with you. And it seems to be a theme from several other musicians that I've spoken to who've also gone through similar things, who were touring and stuff like that. And then when fatherhood came around, it just changed everything. So I think it's very relatable.
It is a young man's game for a reason. A young person's game. There's certainly many young women doing it too, but it's a young person's game for a reason. I think if you're going to do it long term, by the time you have children or very shortly thereafter, you really want to be in a position where you can be the one calling the shots. So you can say, I'll take this tour or I won't take that tour. And you can say, I'm willing to be gone for this long. I'm not willing to be gone for that long. Or you're, Lord willing, successful enough where you can just take your family with you on your own bus. As a hired gun, Certainly, I had the freedom to bring my wife and kids on stuff if I wanted to. Tonic is certainly that type of camp. But I was not the guy writing the check. I was not the guy who owned the business, right? So there are certain I was always free to give my opinion, but at the end of the day, it was not my decision to make. So I knew that I was always going to be limited in that regard.
So you mentioned having not had your like feet under you basically when you jumped into your I guess post touring business career. So what were some of the early challenges that you faced and had to overcome?
Yeah. So I would say that, I mean, as with any business, the primary challenge early on is revenue, making enough money. Um, I was very fortunate that my wife was always supportive. My wife is an entrepreneur. She is a hairdresser. She owns her own shop. So she gets it. I think it would be different if I was married to a non-risk taking, person who just sort of punched a clock and didn't care about the rest. Not to say there's anything wrong with that, but it would have made my transition more challenging. So my wife was always very supportive, and if you just have one person in your corner who's rooting for you, it just makes all the difference in the world, you know. So being okay at home is the start of it. Um, and then also, it was we were in a season where my wife could pick up some of the slack if I couldn't make ends meet a week or two. And that was okay. Well, it wasn't okay with me internally, as a husband and father, I want to provide for my family. So that was I guess that would be struggle number two, is just my internal dialogue. Can I do this? Is it going to work? How am I going to figure this out? But, you just come to work every day and you put your head down and you say, I'm going to figure it out and everything's going to be okay. I just have to trust that that's the case. I'm on this path for a reason. If this isn't the path for me, then that will be made known to me, and I'll take a different direction. But every day I show up and I think I'm just going to do what I think I'm supposed to be doing today. And if that changes, then that changes.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I want to talk a little bit about the content of your YouTube channel specifically. That's where I kind of discovered you, and I connected immediately with some of the messages in your videos because I find that they go beyond just talking to musicians about Spotify and marketing ad campaigns and stuff like that, which is all great and very interesting to those who are dealing with those types of things. But there's other themes like creativity that you mention in one of your videos, you spoke about other, I guess, marketing experts, if you want to call them that, who don't have backgrounds in music per se, whose advice may not have the same, I guess, level of understanding because they haven't gone through it themselves. So, what is the major goal for you in your YouTube channel, and what kind of messages do you want to deliver to people?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm very happy to say that you have sort of identified the thread beneath the thread, right? I sort of I'm trying to think of the right word. Struggle isn't the right word, but um I make an effort to branch outside of just talking about Spotify. I can't I love making YouTube videos and I want to make YouTube videos for a long time. But I don't want to make YouTube videos only about Spotify's algorithm for the rest of my life, right? And I think that there are many aspects of creativity that are incredibly important, and as well as business, and in monetizing your passion, what you love to do, right? I think that we live in a time where you can decide you love anything and you can build a business off of it. Now, how big that business becomes is up to you and how much effort you put in. But I think it's important. It's not just music. That's just the path that I've taken. I think it's important for anybody who is going to give other people advice to have done the thing. I think that if a football coach is going to be an effective coach, he needs to have played some football. I think that if a basketball coach is going to coach basketball, he needs to have played. I think if somebody's going to, be a boxing coach, they need to have fought in the ring. Because I'll paraphrase, but Mike Tyson's famous quote, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Hmm.
You just There are a lot of things that you can know in theory, but until you experience them, you really can't know for sure. So in my world, you don't know what it's like to play on stage to 18,000 people in an arena until you've done it. And it is not what you think it's going to be like. It's actually more fun to play smaller clubs with about 1,500 or 2,000 people because you can see everybody in the room.
Mm.
It's super weird. You think, well, arena's amazing. The coolest part is how far away the exit lights are at the back, but you can't see any of those people. You can only see the first 3 rows. In House of Blues, I can see everybody. I can see the guy standing against the bar, at the very back up top. So what you think is going to happen isn't always what happens. And in my current iteration of releasing music, you just emotionally, it's tough to digest what it's like if you release a song that you've worked really hard on and nobody listens to it. So unless you've done that, it's very difficult to understand. It's also very difficult to say how fast or slowly you should release music. I mean, I don't release music nearly fast enough, and I know that because I have released music slowly. But I wouldn't know that for sure if I hadn't released any music at all. So those are just things that I think are important in with respect to just music. But in general, I just think that I think music, the ideas that I talk about on my channel can translate beyond just music and can speak to, at least I try to speak to other forms of creativity. I think if you're doing any sort of creative work, whether it's music, the written word, photography, filmmaking, these are how we tell stories as human beings. And if you can figure out a way to effectively tell stories through your medium and then figure out a way to monetize that thoughtfully and effectively, then you can potentially have a life where you get to spend all of your time doing the thing that you want to do rather than punching a clock and then trying to carve out time to do the thing that you want to do. And that down in my core is the sort of my passion for YouTube specifically, as I really want to figure out how to identify the inspiration for people outside of just music. And if nobody else out there will be, I'd love to just be the voice of reason and say, like, hey, you can do it. It's possible. And I believe in you, and it's going to be okay.
Do you think now is the best time so far that we've had to be able to do something like that, to live off of your passion and build a business, doing something that you love?
I do. I really do. I also think it's in many ways the most difficult time. So I think it's the best time because all the opportunities are there. You can, I mean, I built a business on top of just hitting publish on YouTube videos. I started just making videos about redoing my studio down here before it was dark, and it was nothing. And so I just made videos about that nobody watched, but I figured out how to make a semi decent video. I still wouldn't say that I'm great at it, but I've gotten better. Um, and I built a business off of it, but I don't have a million subscribers. I have less than 5,000 followers on Instagram, but I have a full-time business that supports my family. So vanity metrics aren't everything, right? Um, on the opposite side of that, I do think it is one of the most difficult times in that there are so many distractions in the world, especially because, my business is fundamentally a media business. This is media, right? The same things we use to create stuff like this vie for our attention. So if you pick up that phone, it is much easier to consume than it is to create. And I think that's the biggest hurdle, let's say, to actually getting through and monetizing the thing that you love to do. You have to either just innately be, which I don't think most people are, or train yourself to be a disciplined, singularly focused individual to say, this is my end goal and I'm going to achieve it and I'm not going to fall victim to the distractions. And when you do, because you will, I certainly do, despite my best efforts, uh, figuring out how to sort of put mental, checks in place to say, I'm doing it, I'm consuming, I'm scrolling, turn it off, put it down. So even if that means deleting stuff off your phone, I just put Instagram back on my phone for the first time after like a year. I don't have YouTube analytics on my phone, YouTube Studio. I don't have any of that stuff on there. I haven't had TikTok on my phone in forever. Uh, I do it all on desktop so that when I go home, it stays here.
You're not the first person to tell me this. It makes so much sense. I think another issue is the volume of content that's out there now. Everybody's trying to be a creator and put their messages out there, put themselves out there online. So what do you do to try to stand out and be different?
I personally feel like I'm seeing a shift towards a higher appreciation for quality in content these days rather than just like put on the phone, selfie mode, post it. Anybody can do that now. Everybody has a smartphone. There's no barrier to entry. It's not to say that you have to have a full production studio or team, but if you just learn about 3-point lighting, you know, like this, and learn about sound and just try a little bit harder than everybody else, I think that already sets you apart tremendously. I think the next thing, and I always get pushback on this, I posted a video about an aspect of this today on YouTube. I said that if I were a new artist on Spotify in 2024, I would release a song a week. People always get mad at me when I say that, and I always expect it, and it's fine. But the truth of the matter is, I would try to, if I were a musician, I would try to post a song. I would release a song every week. If you're making content, I would try to post a short form video every single day. And I would not do that to try to, get the algorithm to love me or to try to just have a ton of content that goes off. The reason I would do that for the first year is to get good at doing that. The more you practice and the more shots you take at the net, the better you get at the thing. There's there are a lot of videos online of Kobe Bryant talking about how he trained. Um, but one of my favorites, he talks about, and I'm gonna destroy it, but excuse me, he talks about how he trains like 3 or 4 times a day, and most guys are training once or twice a day. And he's like, I train it this time, this time, this time, this time. And if you train it this time, and then maybe this time, fast forward 3 years, and I have trained like, I forget what it's like so many more times than you. Like I have 10 years under my belt and you have 3. You can't touch me. You'll never catch me. Even if I slow down, you'll never catch me. And Kobe Bryant is one of the greatest athletes of all time. If he says that, he's on to something. There's truth in what that man said. And I think that applies everywhere. If you want to be good at the thing, then you've got to practice doing the thing. It just so happens that if you're creating media, if you're creating video content, music content, written content, whatever, you happen to be putting that out into the universe where it lives forever. But people also forget you can just delete stuff or unlist it if you want to. If you're not happy with it a year from now, take it down. What you're doing is you're practicing and you're putting the reps in. It's not about, oh, I've got to blow up on Spotify. No, you've got to become a really good songwriter. And the fastest way to do that is to write a lot of songs.
And it ties into what you mentioned before about getting started before you have your entire foundation and plan set out for you, right?
Exactly. Exactly. I think I remember, I forget the number. I'm just forgetting all kinds of details I'm telling you today, but
That's fine.
I forget the number, but I saw some interview with this music executive and they were saying it takes like something like 30 releases for an artist to really find their voice. Um, okay, get there in half a year, get there in 6 months rather than 3 years. If you're releasing a song every couple of months, it's going to take you 3 years to get, or if you release once a month, it's going to take you 3 years to get there. Do it in 6 months. Find your voice, move fast. And then once you've figured it out, your quality goes up, your quantity can come down a little bit. Or now that you have exercised those muscles, you can perform at a really high level in terms of what you're putting out and keep the quantity up as well. If you can do both of those, you're unstoppable. Nobody can touch you.
What are some of the criticisms that you get from people about that? You mentioned having pushback
Yeah.
on that point. What are people saying to contest that wisdom?
Yeah. So the most frequent one is that you will be devaluing the quality of your work and adding to the noise in the marketplace. There's already noise in the marketplace. The noise is at 100%, and it's going to stay at 100%. So whether you contribute or not is irrelevant. I think people also, we have a tendency, I have a tendency, we just as human beings, we don't understand fully how these algorithms work. We assume that if you and I collaborate on a song and we put it out, let's say we do that, we put out 365 songs this year, you and me together. We think that people are going to be hearing all 365 of those songs. The reality is one person might hear 10% of that. Maybe. Maybe if somebody hears 50% of it, let's say we kill it and we put out great songs and somebody hears 50% of it, I'd say that would be a high bar. People are inundated with content, and it's the algorithm and the system's responsibility to dish that out. So your followers aren't going to see everything you post. People who see stuff you post aren't going to follow you. It's just how the game works. Um, but yeah, people, I think, falsely equate quantity, high quantity with low quality. And I'm certainly not saying you should do that. You shouldn't put out just 100 trash songs and call it music. Don't do that either. Try to be good, but try to be fast.
Right. That makes sense. And I would imagine if you're not capable of putting out a high quality song per week, then put out as many as you can. You know, like one per month is, if that's your ceiling, then start there. I think that makes
Yeah.
sense to me. Um, it also reminds me of something else I saw in one of your recent videos about the advantage of having basically no followers, which is you have almost unlimited bandwidth for experimentation. And hey, living proof right here. I have, as of today, 59 YouTube subscribers. So, I can just do whatever I want, can't I? That's a great way of looking at things. And I like that perspective. And it kind of is encouraging, and it's a great way to look at things and have a different type of motivation when you're starting out, I think.
Yeah. I think the point I try to get across with that and with the releasing music and stuff is don't overthink it. We spend so much time, I know I do, and I assume a lot of other creative people are like me. I can overthink stuff until I am blue in the face and not take any action. I can be like, well, what about this thumbnail? What about the audio? I can recolor correct that. I can remix that. I can remaster it. I should add a drum fill here. Done Done is better than perfect. And I stole that from a guy named Nick D, who's a very successful artist on Spotify. There are a whole lot of truth in that. He's another high performing guy who has had an insane amount of output, but quality. He's proof that you can move fast. Um, you've got to do the thing, not sit around and think about doing the thing. So if nobody's following you, take chances, figure out what you like, because that's how you stumble on the thing that you end up being good at. That's what happened with me on my YouTube channel. Music marketing was not on my radar at all. Running a marketing business was not on my radar at all. I thought, well, I'll just be playing drums forever and maybe release a few songs as myself, and that's that. But no, I stumbled upon the music marketing thing because I tried a new type of video and people loved it and started asking questions. So I thought, well, I'll just answer those questions. And then here we are years later, and it's still working. I mean, who knows what this podcast might turn into you? I mean, here we are today, but you might end up, interviewing the president of the United States at some point just because you kept going and kept trying stuff and kept interviewing people who didn't necessarily fit the mold of your previous guest. Branch out, try something new, test waters, see what happens. You never know.
Yep, and that's basically what I'm trying to do. So thanks for those words of encouragement.
Of course.
So the music marketing thing, I'm interested in that. And coming from kind of a music background as well, I don't think you know this about me, but I did play in a band for like 12, 13, for I don't know how many years. Started in 2009, so it's like 15 years now, actually. And yeah, it's been an uphill battle at many points. And at least I've always felt that the marketing aspect of it was my least favorite. And it's always been this kind of nebulous thing. And it's changed so much over the past 15 years, with the increase in the dominance of social media and then the emergence of things like Spotify. And it feels like you have to relearn everything almost every year.
Mhm.
So I'm interested in your take on that. What what are the most essential tips that you have for musicians who need to market themselves but don't know what they're doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, First, I will say the same part of my brain that enjoys music for the complexity of it, for the problem solving, especially producing in a session, figuring out how to sort of bend audio to my will, right? That same part of my brain is what enjoys the marketing part of things. I didn't think that at first, but I've come to understand that's exactly what's going on because it's the same type of thing. You're solving a problem. You're looking at all these different variables and you're figuring out how do they fit together so that I can find the solution to this. A great product doesn't matter if nobody knows about it. Coca-Cola wouldn't sell a bottle if nobody had ever heard of it. So the most important thing with music is you've got to tell people about it. But that doesn't mean be like, hey, I have a new song out. Here's my song, here's my song, here's my song. That's super annoying. People can sniff marketing out very easily. People are smart. So if it feels salesy and gross and markety, people aren't going to enjoy it. The real success with marketing is in presenting your product, in this case, your song, your music, your band, as an option to somebody who already is in the market for something like it and say, well, here's a solution to your problem. So if somebody likes rock music and I'm in a rock band, here's a rock band, here's a rock song. Let me know what you think. The best way to do that is to just be consistent. I mean, going back to the releasing music frequently, posting content frequently, if you can release music very frequently, I'm not going to just, ride to the stable on once a week. If you can put out a song every 2 weeks, every month, every 6 weeks, every 8 weeks, whatever, get music out as fast as you can, do the best job you can with it, and spend your time creating content that includes your music. So I think a lot of people forget that your first job as an artist or as a band is to entertain people. So make entertaining content that includes your music. Now, that can be music video clips and short form video. I wouldn't really go so far as to make a full blown music video for every song you release. I think that's overkill these days. I would make music video style content for short form video. Make it raw on your phone, make it well produced on a DSLR with some good lighting, mix and match, do some behind the scenes stuff in the studio. But the most important thing is your song is the star, not you. So you can talk, but you're actually taking away from your song when you do that. I would keep your song front and center and map everything to that. The second part that I like, obviously, if you've watched any bit of my content, is I love advertising for music. I think as far as paid options go, it's the only one really worth considering. And the reason I like it is twofold. Number one, it can serve as a really good replacement for guys like us who have kids and have jobs and stuff to do. I personally can't put out a song a week. I just don't have the time. I have a wife, I have two children, I have a business to run, I have a weekly YouTube video I put up and other forms of content and all kinds of stuff. I have customers and clients and everything else. Um, so a song a week for me really isn't possible, but ads can sort of supplement that. They can leverage my previous effort from my music and continue to cast that net where my time can't do that. And the second reason I like ads is that if you are producing at a high level of output and you are releasing music faster than most and you're putting out content faster than most, then ads are like a little like magic button, like the Staples button, where you can just apply leverage to what you're doing. So if you have a reel or a TikTok or whatever that goes off and gets 100,000, a million views, run that thing as an ad, man. It's a proven winner, and send that traffic to Spotify. Even if it's something that's just better than the average for you, let's say you get an average of 500 views per reel and you get one that has 5,000, man, put it in an ad, send it to Spotify, get people to listen to your music. So I just think that if you have the money and you have the time to learn it, I think it's a really great lever to just increase your reach as an artist.
That's an interesting perspective, and I think that's something that people are resistant to trying. And I'm speaking from personal experience and my maybe earlier days, but the idea of spending money to get yourself out there, it's like, you need to have money in order to make money type of thing, which a lot of musicians don't necessarily start from that position. So are there any other strategies that you can identify that maybe don't that are outside of like the paying for ads and that type of thing?
Sure. The tried and true still works of playing shows. Play live shows. Play as many shows as you can. Play anywhere. Play everywhere. Play at your cousin's birthday party. Play at the bar down the street. Play everywhere. But make sure you're rehearsing and you are really, really good. Be the best live band you can be so that when people watch you play, they walk away and they go, holy cow, why are those guys playing here? If you can be the best band in the room, even if you're playing at 5 o'clock and you're the first of 8 acts, one person walks away. People love to share their success stories of things that they find. Everybody wants to be first to the new thing. Hey, have you seen this new cup I got? Yeah, I just found out about it. Have you seen these new jeans? Have you heard this new band? You want to be the people's champion in terms of being that band. So if you can be that band who shows up live and just absolutely kills it, then people are going to talk about it and they're going to tell their friends and they're going to tell their friends and people are going to start showing up. I think at the core, I mean, marketing, music marketing fundamentally comes all the way back down to, are you really good at what you do? I think that's the case with everything. Is the product good? In this case, the product is us, unfortunately, to a certain degree. But um, are you good? Are you talented? Have you put in the work? So you've got to be talented, but you've also got to work really hard. The best bands I've ever been in are the ones that rehearsed, and then the ones that really focused on the little bitty details of like, hey, before the second chorus right there, pull back just a little bit. When we go to the bridge right there, make sure you ramp it up. Just little stuff like that. Like, hey, what are you doing right here? Let's tweak that a little bit. Those tiny little minutia, especially from, I mean, 15 years playing in live bands, that's the stuff that does it. The like, hey guys, listen to the record. And when we rehearse tomorrow, let's play it exactly like the record, and then we'll evolve from there. That's how it's done. The best players in the world that I've played with, that's how they do it.
So practice, practice, practice.
Just practice, practice, be really freaking good. If you can write an incredibly good song to the best of your ability, and then you can play that song really, really well live, do that over and over again, and you'll win. I truly believe you'll win.
And it ties back into the idea of releasing as much music as you can, which also ties into the concept of creativity. So I'd like you to speak a little bit about that. As a musician and somebody who makes music yourself, where does your inspiration come from? Where do you draw creativity from? And how do you get over blocks? Because I know that can be such a frustrating thing to deal with for so many people.
Yeah. So I draw my creativity from a number of interesting places. Um, I find that I'm the most creative when I'm able to sort of turn my brain off a little bit. I'm constantly thinking, I'm constantly problem solving. So if I can go for a walk 30 minutes to an hour and just clear my head, sometimes I'll talk to myself out loud and just work stuff out. I look like a crazy person. That helps tremendously. I love being out in the woods, being out in nature, sitting against a tree, shut my eyes for a little bit, just think and just kind of work it out, kind of shower thoughts type of deal. So completely changing pace helps a ton for me. I read comic books. I'm an inveterate reader. I read books on books on books on books. I'm constantly reading. So I get a lot of inspiration from that. I journal every single morning. I'm constantly taking notes in this little journal. I have this little pocket notebook that I keep. I'm constantly writing stuff. I'm constantly writing stuff in my notes app. Probably 10% of what I've ever made in my life has made it into a format where anybody will ever see it. I'm constantly making stuff, constantly, whether it's video, photo, music, whatever. I mean, I have tons of music sessions of songs that are anywhere between 10% and 95% done of stuff that I'm working on and just haven't either had the bandwidth to finish or just don't want to put out. I think just constantly creating is incredibly important. And as far as overcoming blocks and obstacles and stuff, I struggled with that for a very long time. I would sit down and not be able to do anything, get distracted, procrastinate, sidetracked, whatever. Then I'd get down on myself because I didn't get anything done, and beat myself up. A lot of negative self-talk. But the way that I've figured out my mind works to overcome that is if I can sit down and just immediately start doing the thing, whatever it is, just start doing it. If it's writing, if I have to write a newsletter, the first few lines of the newsletter may be, I don't know what to write in this newsletter, but I'm going to keep writing just to sort of get started and then and it'll start. It's the same thing with music. If I just put on headphones, start playing some chords, start playing a drum beat, I know that all that's going to get thrown away, but that's okay. Ed Sheeran has a reference to this. He calls it the dirty faucet method. So when he writes music, um, he says the first little bit that you write is going to be dirty, nasty water that comes out of the faucet. You're not going to want to drink it, but you've got to open the faucet. You've got to let the dirty water flow, and eventually the clean water will come. But it's not going to come out if you don't turn on the faucet in the first place. So that tremendously resonated with me, and I found that to be true in my life. If I just get started, then everything will work itself out usually.
I've also heard that creativity is more like a muscle that you need to exercise than
Totally.
anything else. Have you found that to be true?
100%. Yeah. The more I am making stuff, the easier it is to make stuff. I think it's the case with anything. I mean, the more videos I make on YouTube, the easier it becomes to make a video on YouTube. The more comments I respond to on YouTube, especially those that are challenging or disagree, the easier it becomes for me to respond to challenging or disagreeing comments on YouTube. I just get better at navigating it. That's the case for anything. If you do more pull-ups, you're going to be able to do more pull-ups.
So then, if that's the case, how do you keep things fresh once you get comfortable doing something and you get into a groove and you're used to doing something? How do you avoid things get from getting stale?
Yeah. Well, you repaint your entire studio. I did that over the holiday. This room was stark white and everything in here was white, blue light. Um, that kind of, I don't have as good of an answer for that because that sneaks up on me from time to time. It's really easy to dial things in and you get systems and routines set. And then you start to depend on those, and then it becomes more rote and the creativity sort of goes out the window. So I find that if I will switch up sort of what I'm consuming in terms of music and books and comic books and stuff, that helps a lot. If I will just take my camera, the video I posted today is me sitting back here on this couch. It's very uncommon for me. It's usually just this angle every time. In my old space, it was the last, I don't know, 40 videos, 50 videos are all from one angle in my old studio because I just got into the system. But I think if you can embrace the discomfort a little bit, at least that's the case for me. If I can just make myself a little bit uncomfortable and embrace that a little bit, then I find myself, it's that problem solving part of my brain. I have to solve the problem and then I become more creative again.
That's so interesting. It reminds me of when I spoke to a previous guest who was a comedian, and he told me that the input can be as important as the output. You know, like it what you ingest influences what comes out afterwards.
Totally.
So what are you into? What is your biggest inspiration in terms of like other artists or things that you're consuming to get inspired?
So right now I've been on an ambient music kick. I'm really loving like the soundscapes and sort of like minimalist audio design. I think I've been I've been sort of leaning into a more minimalist idea, philosophy of life for the last, I don't know, say 10 years. Um, and there is something about there's a less is more thing. And I still am trying to figure out how to tap into that. But I think that's one of the reasons I've drawn to ambient music recently is it's you can evoke so much emotion with so little. And I'm like, if I can take that and apply that to sort of more produced music, electronic stuff like what I make, that could be really interesting. Because I have one full length record that I put out by myself, and it was a goal for me. I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. I literally did everything on this record. Nobody helped do anything else. I wrote everything, mixed, mastered, produced, da 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 da, all of it. And now that that's done, I look back on it and I think, excuse me, um, a lot of that stuff is overproduced. I kept sticking more stuff in there thinking it'll make it better. And so where I am now is I think, what can I take out? How can I make this a lean, mean, productive machine, both with music, with video, studio? I've gotten rid of gear that I had in my old space. Um, I think that kind of stuff has really been weighing on me a lot lately. And I've been reading I've been reading more nonfiction lately instead of fiction. And that has been sort of informing my mindset a little bit too. I think I've not intentionally, I've sort of adopted a bit more of like a pragmatic thought process in the last 6 months or so. And I think that's been kind of having an influence on how I approach what I create.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I think the minimalist thing is it resonates because it's so easy to get overwhelmed these days, as much with information as with, gear and the latest technology and this and that. And there's a certain element to stripping things down that to me inspires more creativity. It's like how much can I do with less? And it reminds me of a movie that I watched with Jack Black, where he was basically, the intro of the movie is him with this homemade guitar that he made, nailing some wires to like a piece of wood, and like like he ended up writing a song with it.
Talking about, yeah.
Right. And that was just such a cool example. And you hear that in these big league musicians who are like, yeah, I recorded with this $50 guitar that I bought at a pawn shop and this, $100 amp that I bought when I was, 14 years old. And you think, yeah, that makes total sense. It's like that lack of fancy things kind of like inspires a different level of creativity that you wouldn't have had access to if you had all the choices at your disposal.
Yeah, I think we forget about decision fatigue. If I have six guitars, if I have 60 guitars, I mean, I know guys who have 100 guitars in their basement. If you have 100 guitars to choose from, how are you ever going to pick the one? Usually what ends up happening is they have one or two that they use for everything, and they don't use any of the other ones. They stay in cases. So that's a factor. Um, I think we forget that everything has a learning curve and everything requires maintenance to some degree. So if you buy something, you have to maintain it. If you can't afford to maintain it, whether emotionally, internally, or financially, you really probably shouldn't have the thing. But it also has a learning curve. If I get a new piece of gear, I have to figure out how to use it. And now I'm spending a week learning how to use this thing rather than actually creating the stuff. Now, obviously, on the other side of that, there is an argument for introducing new stuff into your circle that actually inspires. Totally. When I got this new camera instead of using my phone, made a world of difference to how creative I felt and what I could produce with it. So there is an argument for getting new stuff, yes, but I think that we live in a consumer driven culture and we default to consuming things, which means buying more stuff to solve a problem that needs to be solved internally rather than actually through a purchase. And I think that's one of the fundamental issues with like the gear tube thing of people showing off all the gear they have. I'm like, man, you can make music on this. That's all you need. I mean, you really, if you don't want to do that, you can just make it on a laptop. You don't need an external MIDI keyboard or anything like that. You can just use what you have instead of trying to fill that void by buying more stuff.
Absolutely. It's still early in the year, so people are, if you haven't given up on your New Year's resolution yet, congratulations. Currently, it's February 1st. I'm not sure when this episode will come out, but goals are still on people's minds, and I'd like to know about some of yours. What are your big goals for this year, and how do you go about identifying what those goals are, and what are your tried and true strategies for sticking to them?
Yeah. So a few goals I have for this year are I want to I want to release more music than I have been for myself personally. I released an album last year and that was it. My bandwidth for output has been very small because my business has grown and the demand for my time has increased. So I really would like to release more music as myself. Um, I also want to release music not as me. So I'm tinkering with the idea of creating maybe a little side project that I don't tell anybody about because of the trajectory of, I guess, me in the public space as a music marketing guy and just a YouTube personality, I guess. My people are far less concerned with my music and far more concerned with my business and how I can help them. And that's a wonderful thing. And I'm happy about that. That's totally cool. I want to help people. And I'm glad that that's how I've been identified in the marketplace, let's say. So releasing music as me, I now realize is sort of, it really just serves the purpose for sort of as a showcase of what I'm testing in service of my business. But to do something on the side that nobody knows about, I think would be more fulfilling for me creatively and could serve as a testing ground that is also independent of this thing that I've built as Tom DuPree. So it would be cool to be able to release music as somebody else that nobody knows about and not tell anybody about it. And then 2 years from now, be like, hey, well, here's what I did. Here's how it went. You know, nobody knew about it, and this is what happened. Because that's kind of how I started my channel to begin with was here's what I did and here's what happened. So I kind of want to get back to that. Um, Another goal I have is, I guess really before that is, I want to maximize the time that I spend with my family and how I spend that time with them. I really want to be more thoughtful about how I'm structuring my work time, how I'm structuring my business, the problems we solve, and how we do that. so that I am building a business that serves me and my desired lifestyle to a certain degree rather than me serving it all the time. I live to serve other people through DuPree X. I absolutely adore it. It is a ton of fun, but I don't want to do it in a way that does not become sustainable 5, 10 years from now. So I want to be thoughtful about it now while it's still relatively small compared to hopefully what it will become, and have a more intentionally designed business, I guess is the way of putting it. And then I also just want to figure out ways to better serve artists. I'm always paying attention to what people are replying to, saying in the comments. I'm always trying to do my best to reply to every single person and trying to understand the need amongst independent artists. I have such a heart for independent artists specifically. I'm not really interested in working for labels. I like the little guy. I want to help the little guy win, and I want to figure out how to do that. And I want to do it in a way that is truly helpful. I want to do it in a way that makes my business money so that I can keep doing it. If I go out of business, then I can't keep doing it. But I also don't want to do it in a way that just charges whatever I think I can get because, again, I have a heart for the little guy. So I don't want to be the guy who like tries to make all the money. If that happens as a byproduct, woohoo, let's go. But more importantly, I want to try to focus on what does the 18-year-old kid need who's trying to do this for the first time? What does the 45-year-old guy need who is now finally making music after taking a break for 20 years because he had a family? How can I help? So those are my goals for the kind of for the year. How I get to those, I try to step back from the big audacious goal. Well, first of all, I write them all down. So I have 7 categories. I think it's 7. I do it at the beginning of every year, and I write down goals in every category. So it's stuff like family, financial, career, spiritual, health, stuff like that. And I'll write down specific goals that go in each of those categories. And then I will write down, I will make sure those goals are actionable and quantifiable. It's easy to say, did I do the thing? And check the box. And then I try to build stuff into my calendar, either daily or weekly or monthly, to get me sort of as stepping stones toward those goals. So just break it down in smaller and smaller pieces.
It's so crazy. I literally just read a chapter in a book last night detailing exactly what you just said about like writing down your goals. Like I think even down to the categories and
Yeah.
everything and making sure that they're actionable. So yeah, that's great advice.
Yeah. Cool.
Um,
It could be a book I've read in the past. I don't know. I read a lot. I could have read it and forgotten the title and
oh,
stole.
this
So
one was is called Activate Your Life. It's by it's by somebody who I actually had on the podcast last year, Derek Loudermilk. Basically a compilation of tips from coaches from across the world to kind of optimize your life and like help you move forward. So yeah, that's great
um,
great bit of wisdom there.
yeah, my dad got me started on the goal thing when I went to college. He was like, start writing down your goals. And he was and he put it in a way that was really cool. He was like, it doesn't matter if it's stupid. It doesn't matter if you think you'll never have it. You definitely won't achieve it if you don't write it down. So he's like, you want a Ferrari one day? Put it on there. You want to live in a 40,000 square foot house? Put it on there. You want to own a plane? Put it on there. It's like, it, it may not happen if you write it, but it definitely won't if you don't write it. And I
So
have
true.
found that true. I can look back at my goals from when I was 23 and be like, wow, literally all of it. I did all of it because I kept writing it down.
What are some uncomfortable truths that independent musicians need to hear about the music industry that they might not understand?
Oh man, good question. Oh, you're gonna make me do this. um, let's see. So nobody owes you their ears. You are not obligated, or no one is obligated to listen to your music just because you made it. That's very difficult, especially when you have put a lot of work into it, which sort of goes back to what I said earlier about like, you can't understand how it feels to have put your heart and soul into a song and release it and have nobody listen until you've done it. It sucks. It hurts really bad.
Like
Those scars and those failures are what make us stronger. And then we show back up and we do a little bit better next time. So nobody owes you their ears. If nobody's listening, try again, try harder. Um, Almost without fail, every single person I have met in the music business, and I have met a lot of very successful people, is very talented. But the ones who stick around for a long time also work harder than everybody else. So you've got to be talented, but talent does not win. You've got to be willing to work hard. And hard work really means just showing up every day and consistently trying to do a little bit better. Um, Not everybody drinks and does drugs the way you think they do in the music business. Most everybody who performs at a high level stays away from those things to a certain degree, especially the drug use. Might have a glass of wine or two after a show, beer, something like that. I almost never saw any hard drug use amongst the high level musicians and performers in my career. Um, I think another one that's very difficult to internalize is it's going to take time. I remember when I was 18 and I thought I was too old to be in a band. And then I got out of college and I thought I was too old to be in a band. And then I got a record deal at 25 and I thought, why are they giving this old man a record deal? And I I got the Jana Kramer gig at like 27 and I thought, wow, swan song. And then I got the Tonic gig at 33 and I was like, man, still doing it. It takes time and you're not too old, but be patient. Um, if you're 15, it probably won't happen until you're 25. Keep going and keep working hard.
It's great
I think
advice.
for now.
What do you think about the state of the music industry today, and particularly with the angle of independent and up and coming musicians? Is it harder to get somewhere today than it was, let's say, 10, 15, 20 years ago?
No, I think it's easier. I think having staying power is more difficult because labels are not, they're not taking ownership for the success of a band. You know, rewind a long time ago, like Led Zeppelin, like the record label was very much invested in their success. They weren't going to be like, well, we'll give it a shot. If it doesn't work, it's all good. Like, no, they're putting all their eggs in that basket. That doesn't happen anymore. Uh, Labels will sign 200 artists a year and they'll break five. That's just the game. And they'll take a tax write off for all those advances. And it's honestly smart financial sense. It destroys the careers sometimes of the other 195, and that sucks. I was one of them, but it is how the game is played. I still think there's a place for a record deal. I don't think record deals are all bad. It depends on what your goals are. If you want to be an arena level blue chip player, you're probably going to need a record deal because you need access to that engine. You need access to the booking, the con, you know, connection with brand deals at that level. You need somebody who's going to put Bud Light on the side of your all 16 semi trucks that are pulling up to the arena. You need international travel and like all that stuff that comes along with a label. I think the best deals end up coming when you put yourself in a position where you don't need a record label. And that's when a record label comes and says, hey, we want a piece of your profitable business. And you can say, hey, okay, cool. Well, here are my terms. And if they don't take it, that's fine because you're already making $1 million a year or whatever. Um, so I think that having that staying power is tough because there's so many new artists coming online all the time, and there's a lot of good music being put out, a lot of bad music being put out, but that's always been the case. There's a lot of really good music being put out, and the tools are there to make really good music a lot more easily than they used to be with software and all that kind of stuff. So, um, yeah, I think that it's possible. I think you just have to decide what version of it you want, and then be laser focused on it.
I can't resist asking this question because it's, all that anybody has been talking about lately, but AI and music. Um, is that a scary thing to you or an encouraging thing? Like, do you think there's potential for it to be leveraged as a positive thing? Where do you stand on that?
I mean, I could give you the absolute like cop out answer. Like, well, anything's possible, but I I am not I'm not overly enthusiastic about AI in music. Um, I do fear for the potential of especially the little like music creation AI engines where it's like, oh, just make a lo-fi beat, put it on Spotify. That's kind of terrifying, and I'm not enthusiastic about that. That does worry me. I do think, though, much in the same way that people can sniff out an ad and sniff out if they're being sold to, people are smart. And I think that if, as soon as people realize that the market is getting flooded with AI generated content, they are going to figure out how to sniff out authentic content. Did somebody make this or not? I need to know so that I can support them, especially the people who care about that. There are always going to be people who are like, I don't care. I'm running a restaurant during the lunch shift. Just put music on. I don't care if it's AI or not, right? But for people who are actually music fans, they're going to want to know. And I can foresee a world where platforms like Spotify and Apple Music have to adapt, and they have to have like checks in place that basically like this playlist is all actual musicians. This playlist is all AI, right? Or we just don't let that on here. Spotify probably won't do that because it won't serve their bottom line, but I think who can foresee the future? But I do think that it is a threat to a certain degree. Yeah. I wouldn't say I'm super excited about it. I kind of view it as like I think the internet at large is still a bit of a toddler. The algorithms that we use every day are still in their infancy. And now we've just put them behind the wheel of a Formula One car with AI and expect them to take the turn at 200 miles an hour. Like it's going to not happen well.
Yeah, well, I think it's definitely going to be interesting to watch what happens, and we'll just have to make the best of it one way or another.
Yeah. I mean, we're all here for the ride together. So we just have to adapt and figure it out. And if it means spending less time on this and more time face to face, then maybe we do that
I don't think that's a bad thing at all.
either.
Is there anything important that you'd like to touch upon that we haven't already?
Man, I don't think so. I think the only thing I would say probably a reiteration is if you're making stuff, if you're creating things, just do it because you love it. Keep going. The world needs creative people. The world needs art. I think that if you look at history, history is told through the written word and art. It's not told through money and business. Certainly, those things are factors and they're important and they have changed the course of history, no doubt about it. But when you look at the story of history, it is told through print in books and it is told through art. So, as an artist, as a storyteller, you have more power than just about anybody to influence culture and leave a mark. So, do it.
That's a great way to wrap it up. Thank you so much, Tom. I really appreciate it. It was great meeting you. This was a fantastic conversation, and I hope we can do it again.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it too.